Some More Outdoor, Episode 18.
Welcome to Some More Outdoor, where we speak with authors, entrepreneurs, and business owners about how the outdoors has affected their life and their projects. This show is to remind you of the healing properties of the outdoors. So, are you ready to learn what the nature effect can do for your life? Well, here's your host, Brett Trout.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Some More Outdoor. I'm your host, Brett Trout, and this is the podcast dedicated to reminding you to get out and experience the nature effect. My goal is to help you reestablish your connection with nature so you can live with childlike wonder again. I'm so excited to be here today. I have a very special guest, Dan Miller. How you doing, Dan?
Doing excellent. Excited to be your guest.
Well, thank you. So Dan is the author of the New York Times best-selling 48 Days to the Work You Love. If you've ever buried your dreams in an attempt to be practical or realistic, then Dan will show you how embracing those dreams is the most practical way to enjoy life and achieve the success that you're looking for. So Dan, I've given our audience a little overview about you. Why don't you go ahead and take it away and share a little bit more about your story?
Well, I grew up on a farm, so I grew up very simple, but knew that I wanted to see more, do more, go more than what seemed to be my destiny there. So I kept going to school to give myself some new opportunities, but I've spent most of my life now having the privilege of working with people to just try to kind of figure this thing out. Why am I here? What am I going to do? And how do we translate that into work, daily work that not only pays the mortgage, but is also meaningful, fulfilling, purposeful, those kind of things as well. So it's been a marvelous journey. And at this point, as a speaker, author, coach, I have a lot of opportunities to share that message with people who are hungry to hear it.
Well, thank you. And I just wanted to say a shout out to you, Dan. I've been watching you since probably 2008 when you started the 212 Connection. Obviously, I found out about you from Dave Ramsey's financial piece and his website, and that's how I got connected with you. And then in 2009, had an opportunity to meet you and Ashley as a certified facilitator for the 48 days. And just to see your journey over the last 5 years since I've known you has just been so awesome and so encouraging for me and those that I know in the online communities around the world. And I just want to personally say thank you for all that you do and what you've done in my life. And it's like, as the saying goes, once you stretch a rubber band, it never goes back to its original form. And that's how my life has been since we met. The ideas and the concepts and the dreams that have come out of the 48 days has really inspired me to start this podcast. And it's taken a long time, but I'm at that point now where I'm just so excited to have it going, and especially to have you as my featured guest today.
Well, I appreciate that. I talked to somebody this morning who told me that I ruined his life. Yeah. And you got to describe it. It's like getting Joanne, my wife, a car that, years ago, we didn't have power windows or anything. Then get a car with power windows. Oh my gosh, I can never go back. Then it's, heated seats and air-conditioned seats and cruise control and a moonroof. And like anything you experience, you get spoiled with the average. And this guy went on. It was a very, tongue-in-cheek message to me that I ruined his life because listening to my podcast and reading my books and being here at the sanctuary, he said he just wasn't content with normal anymore. And it opened him up to so many new things that now he's having to stretch to fulfill those things that have come into his head as dreams. You certainly have done that as well, Brad. I commend you on moving forward with what you're doing here.
Well, thank you. And this idea, this topic that we're just talking about that kind of relates so well with what I'm trying to do for people, is because technology has come around and we've gotten so adapted to technology that it's hard to unplug for people. It's hard to go back to the way that we used to live. Not that we want to, but there are certain things that we do miss in our life, such as our time spent outdoors. And the whole goal of this show is to help people realize that part of their life that they're missing. Because there are a lot of people that are struggling, and I'm further along in the path from where they're starting, and you are as well. but it's hard for us to realize that what we are missing is that connection with nature and that time outside to become inspired, to relax and unplug from our daily schedules that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big piece that a lot of people are realizing can add a sense of peace and joy to their lives that they're missing now.
And it's very inspiring too to hear the stories from people like you to help others get out and experience what I'll talk about later in the show, which I call the nature effect. So why don't we just go ahead and jump right in? I always like to start off the show with a quote, and I prefer, since it's a outdoor themed show, if you have a nature quote, great. If not, is there some type of mantra that you live by? And why don't you go from there and share with us that quote or mantra?
Sure. There's a little poem by Emily Dickinson, famous poet and writer, that my wife has right beside her computer. Now, she's got a very idyllic setting for her computer that looks out over her yard. But this is the poem. Some keep the Sabbath going to church. I keep it staying at home, with a bobolink for a chorister and an orchard for a dome. Some keep the Sabbath in surplus. I just wear my wings, and instead of tolling the bell for church, our little sexton sings. God preaches, a noted clergyman, and the sermon is never long. So instead of getting to heaven at last, I'm going there all along. It's just one of those cute little things that we like to look at. You know, some people are, searching for a sacred space. Wow, we just walk out our front door and there we are. And we really enjoy that.
Yes, and it's a beautiful place. I've had a chance to walk around your property, through your trail, and just be there in the environment to learn and to grow myself. So I love what you've created there, and I love what you've done with the sanctuary. It's such a beautiful place.
Well, thank you. You need to revisit us again. We've made some pretty dramatic additions in the last couple of years since you've been here, I think.
Yes. Well, and I've been watching too. I've seen the different things that, like what Scott created for you with the eagle and just the different things that you have around there. So let's jump right into the first question. It's about a childhood memory. And since I'm trying to help people reconnect with that childlike wonder that they have through nature, it always inspires people to think about a childhood memory that they have. And most of the time, a lot of our childhood memories, some of the ones that are the most prominent in my mind, are those that I spent with my family outdoors, those times that I got to play outdoors and just experience being a kid, being a boy outside. So why don't you tell us a story from your childhood about an experience that you had, and take us to that time in your life and tell us that story.
I grew up, mowing fields and baling hay. I mean, we were farmers, milk cows, seeing the soybean rows just bursting through the ground. And I was always, even as a little kid, just in awe of how we'd put one single seed in the ground. It turns into a tiny plant, then it grows into a big plant, and finally shares hundreds of replicas of the very seed that started its life. And it really is a principle that went deep, deep into me as a little kid, that, there are some things when you plant them, and it's not just physical things or seeds, but ideas do that as well, where you plant it and it grows. It comes back with hundreds more of what you originally planted as a little seed. Now, that has implications in terms of saving money, but of sharing ideas and all those things. But I love the real life lessons that I learned by being out on the farm.
There are so many people, I guess you would say that there's so much that we can learn. I love gardening. I didn't when I was a little kid because most of the time it was hoeing weeds. But as I got older, just planting things, and like you say, just taking that little seed and planting it and watching it and to grow into something that you could use, whether it was an herb, whether it was a fruit or vegetable that you could take, and just the lessons that we learned from watching those grow. A lot of people forget about those lessons that they learned when they were a kid, because we were told to wake up, get a good job, and all that good stuff. But I appreciate you definitely sharing how that relates to our lives and how that had an impact on your life as well.
It went very deep. I really value. No, I don't want to make my living as a farmer. I've discovered some other kind of cool opportunities, but oh my, I still value the lessons learned there and still want to be right on the land as part of my daily life.
And you've created that. You have a forest around your house, right?
We do. We have trees on 4 sides around our house.
This is kind of just off topic, I guess, but why did you choose to live in a place like that?
Well, in leaving the farm and in having that kind of sense that I don't want to be just hoeing weeds all my life, the antithesis of that, is living in the city. Well, Joanne and I did that briefly and discovered, wow, this is not us. We do not thrive in this kind of environment. So we moved out a little bit more. Now, we've moved several times in the course of me being back in graduate school and different things that I've been involved in business-wise. But at this point, we live just about 5 miles outside of Franklin, Tennessee. Franklin's a little town about 20 miles south of Nashville, Tennessee. And we're on 10 acres, and it's just that perfect balance for me. It's plenty to keep up with. I'm always, cleaning up shrubs and brush, and we have lots of animals on our property. It's a little more than I need to mow, so we've got a crew that comes in and does that, but I still am responsible for new landscape designs and all. It's just a perfect blend. Now, it also means that I can work on our property, not in the same building, not in our house, but in another building that you're familiar with on our property. So it just provides everything right here. Now, we're not totally self-sustaining or nothing like that. We don't have solar panels. We still use a lot of modern conveniences, but it's just that right blend that seems to work for us. Having modern conveniences, but still being totally connected to the land.
And I can see what being in an environment like that has done for you, as well as what you've shared on your social networks and on your podcast about those people that have come to visit you and how people that actually have lived in a city. I remember there was a story of a guy that you talked about. I think he was a lawyer, but I'm not sure, where he had come down from New York to spend some time with you there, and just what you saw in him, the change that environment that you created had on him.
Yeah, you're right. I know exactly who you're talking about. His name is Nick. He's an attorney and came here just wanting some tips for expanding his practice some, and went away with something he didn't expect, and that was getting a little glimpse of the life that we lived here, and went home and quit his practice, moved from New York City up to a little country area up in Massachusetts where they bought a house. He's legal counsel for a small company, but is investing his time in some things that have much more to do with connecting with his wife and kids.
Well, and sometimes, and like that story and your story, and I know with Kevin's story and Justin Lucas Savage as well, is just getting into an environment that makes you come alive. And a lot of time that has to do with being in an environment around nature.
Yeah, it does. We're not trying to promote a cookie cutter plan for everybody. People are different. I know people who live, on the 18th floor, condominium, and they love it. Boy, that's great. I'm not going to try to change their mind, but I can't imagine anything more confining and more soul stripping for me than to have to do that. I mean, concrete and asphalt do not bring out the best in me. They're an environment that immediately reminds me that I need to get away from that as quickly as possible, back where I have dirt under my feet and grass growing up between my toes.
Right. Well, that's a great segue into my next question, and it's about an outdoor experience that you've had. So tell us a time when you visited one of the most beautiful places, or a special place to you, and take us to that time in your life and tell us that story.
Sure. We've had a lot of opportunities to see beautiful places in Europe and around the world, and I happen to love the United States. But a couple of years ago, we went to a place called Hatchet Key, and it's an island. And what we did was fly to Belize City, down in Belize, then took a small plane down to Placenta, and then we went in a boat 17 miles straight out into the Caribbean. And we stayed on a little tiny island out there for a week. Now, it's got, again, modern conveniences. We weren't staying in a tent, but being that far away from land, there's very little ambient light at night. It's absolutely dark. And you can see the stars like nowhere else. the sky is just absolutely magnificent. And it's a reminder of what a tiny speck I am in the scope of the universe. So it's beautiful and yet humbling at the same time. I remember experiences like that. I love those unique experiences in nature that just give me a little glimpse of things that I haven't seen before. We get so accustomed to just the way things are in our daily lives. But Joanne and I look for opportunities to go to places where things are done differently, where lifestyle is different, where faith is different, and where nature is different, and just experience things through the eyes of being somewhere else. But that was one that really stands out.
Hatchet Key, you said?
Yes.
Hatchet Key. I'll definitely check into that and put a link in the show notes because I'm finding the information. I've been listening to what people have said about different places that they've gone. And so to be able to go and do research on it and look at it, I'm creating this list of all the places that I want to go, and just to experience places like that. And like you said, I love being in the United States too. There's so many different beautiful places that we can go to and see. But going or I guess you would say having that opportunity to be able to travel like you and Joanne do and see places like that you would never experience in the United States is amazing.
It is. It helps us experience things new. It helps us appreciate the things we have and to identify what we really want to have around us. So it's just a broadening experience.
And do you find that when you go to some place like that you come back more refreshed?
I do. Now, I have been very intentional about the life that we live. So I don't live a life that's draining, exhausting. I don't pine away for 50 weeks of the year, hoping that I get those 2 weeks to somehow escape the life that I live in. Not at all. I love the life that I have. So in as much as we enjoy going to other places, I still love coming back to the life that we've created. And again, I hope that's an encouragement to your listeners. You really can do that. I mean, I didn't start off with what we have now, but as I got clearer and clearer in living my own life about the place that I wanted to live and breathe and thrive and prosper, then we created it. And so I love to travel, but I also love the life that I live in the majority of the year right here.
That's so wonderful to hear. And that is definitely encouraging for me. And I'm sure will be encouraging to everybody who tunes in and listens to this show. The reason why I followed that question up with coming back refreshed is because I've come up with a term that I've experienced similar along the lines of the butterfly effect, but I call it the nature effect. And it's basically the impact that nature has on you when you do break away every once in a while, as John Muir says, and get out away from the city life, get away from the light so you can look up at the stars. How does the nature effect have an impact on you in your life and business today?
Well, Brad, you've already kind of alluded to it in identifying where I work. I work in a barn that we call the sanctuary. We bought this property that adjoins ours, our primary residence. We bought it a few years ago. It had an old trailer in the front that people lived in, but it had this old barn where they just did car repair and kind of stored junk. But we got rid of the trailer very quickly. But in looking at the barn, I thought, man, I'm an old farm kid. I'd love to have a barn that looked like a barn. So we did a very light modification on the outside, but then remodeled the inside. Again, made it just comfortable to have live events here. We have living quarters here, a couple guest rooms, and then my office is here. Most of the time I'm here entirely by myself. I mean, 95% of the time it's just me here. But on our property around the sanctuary where I work and between here and our house, we have nature trails. We have beautiful plants and flowers all year long. We have wood and bronze sculptures of eagles. We have a breathtaking water feature. And walking around, I see birds and wild turkeys. We have honeybees, one of our recent additions. So when people come here for our coaching or mastermind events, they may not remember long the business techniques we covered, but they will never forget the experience of being here on our property. So that nature effect is something that I am immersed in all the time. That's what keeps me inspired. That's what helps me be creative as I listen to the stories of people and sift through those and then help them come up with principles that can make their own lives better.
Well, and that's what I want people to get out of there. And what Dan just said, it helps them to be inspired. And that's really what the impact that nature has on a lot of people is when you get out away from all the noise and distractions in your life, and just you have time to be silent and you have time to think and look around. And that's when the inspiration just kind of bubbles up out of you. When you're walking on a trail like Dan has created in his house. And so with that inspiration, Dan, and I'm sure you've had plenty, but if you can share with us one idea that came from an inspirational walk around your property.
Yeah, absolutely. One that really sticks out. About 5 years ago, in the spring, I noticed there was this one very large cedar tree. It's about 65 feet tall, cedar tree that was not coming back to life. It was totally brown. The others were greening up, and it was clear this tree was dead. Now, I don't know what happened, still don't. I had tree guys come out. There's no explanation for it. But here's this very, very tall. Now, this is just a scrub tree. It's nothing we planted, and it's kind of thing that most people get rid of on their property. But it was a cedar tree. Now, it was dead. Well, with that, most people would just cut it down and then have to deal with an ugly stump and get rid of that. But I immediately thought, is there something we could do that would be different, that would be extraordinary, that most people wouldn't see? I mean, I've made a very good living, Brett, helping people see things that are right around them that they typically don't notice or don't see, or see things in new ways. So I contacted a lady who I know is a wood sculptor, had her come out here before I did anything with the tree at all. I said, Terry, I'm just convinced there's an eagle trying to get out of that tree. Now, she walked around it for quite some time and didn't say much. And finally she said, Dan, I think you're right. So she came out. I then, at that point, had it topped about 14 feet off the ground. So the big weight of this dead tree was gone, about 14 feet up. She came out, we set up a scaffolding, and she went to work with her chainsaw and then very quickly to wood chisels, and she released an absolutely gorgeous eagle. The wingspan's about 6 feet across. The wings are what would have been the two lowest branches on the tree. But she released this gorgeous, gorgeous eagle. The colors, these rich red, and orange, and yellow in there, totally 100% natural. I did nothing to add color. We just simply put a marine finish on it to preserve it so it doesn't change. But it's a great example. It's a great metaphor for the business that I'm in, for one thing. And that is, sometimes when something dies, we think that's the end. And yet what's happening, it's getting ready to birth something even more beautiful than what was there originally. I see that in the lives of people when they lose a job and they're devastated. And then 18 months later, they say, that's the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced them to take a fresh look at what was really there, what they really had as their dreams, and develop those. But those are the kind of things, when I walk around our property, and we often, when we have events here, we have people walk around the property, and we do things to help them see things in new ways. But we have wood or nature trails with wood chips. Well, the wood chips, we have a very large pile on our property at any given time. And it's because we befriend the tree companies that come around, have to maintain the electric lines with the easement, keep the lines clear. Well, all the neighbors hate these guys because of what they do to the trees. I befriend the guys and let them dump their wood chips on our property. They consider that a blessing because they don't have to drive 20 miles out in the country to dump them. And I get unlimited wood chips with all these rich woods, colors and scents and aromas. And then I do nature trails. We've done playground areas for the grandkids. And then my neighbors are stopping by and say, wow, can I buy some of your wood chips? And I'm like, geez, I didn't pay anything for them. I just saw things differently than you did to have those be part of making a great experience here rather than a negative. But the idea is, we can go on and on and on. But sometimes if I'm feeling dry, Brett, all I have to do is grab one of my little granddaughter's hands and have her walk with me around the property. I'm going to see things pointed out to me that I would otherwise miss. Leaves and shapes and the trees and animals and birds and sounds. It's just wonderful to be out there as an ever rich experience.
Well, and like you say, we go in our daily lives, unless you're going out there with your granddaughter, you've got so much on your mind and you're just thinking, and then she's there pointing out the little things, the flowers, the little bugs that are crawling along the ground. And we miss that as we get older, unless we have kids or grandkids. But one of the things I like to do is when I go outside for a walk in our neighborhood, is there's a lot of trees and I love to look at people's yards and see what they've done with their yards and stop and just admire and feel, I guess, get that feeling back into me like when I was a kid, and be intentional about making sure that I'm living with that childlike wonder and not missing anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can miss it real quick.
And what you said, the inspiration for your idea with the eagle, is there a place that people can go to actually see that picture or see the tree?
There is. If you go to 48days.com about page.
The about page.
Just scroll down on the about page. You'll see a little 59-second video that kind of tells the story and gives them a real gorgeous shot of that eagle. We've named that eagle Aristotle. I gave my readers and listeners an opportunity to come up with names. So it's Aristotle, which means to be your best self.
To be your best self. I did not know that. That's great. Okay, Dan, well, we're going to jump into some final questions. And we've talked about your story, and we'll continue a little bit on your story. But the last questions are really to help people get an idea of either how certain things are impacting their life with like not getting out in nature, and what they can really do to add more of the outdoor surroundings that they have around them into their life. So when you get outdoors, what is your number one activity that you like to do?
I love to walk. I love the physical experience of walking. I mean, it's funny. Because we have two pieces of property, they form an L, and the mailboxes are about a quarter of a mile apart. So it used to be, now it doesn't happen much anymore because everybody knows, but I would have neighbors stop and offer to give me a ride. They'd see me walking out on the road. And I'm like, no. I'm not trying to get anywhere. I'm just enjoying the process of walking. But I walk a lot on the property. Now, I also have my old farm days. I've got a little John Deere tractor, a little hydrostatic drive with a bucket on it. And I love getting out and, moving some wood chips onto a new nature trail or creating a new landscape area. We have a lot of rocks here that we've positioned into designs that make it really something interesting to look at. I'm getting ready to build a labyrinth on our property. It's going to be spectacular, but I'm forever just getting ideas about things that I can do, not to dramatically change the natural landscape, but just to enjoy it in a new way.
Can you share a little bit about that labyrinth? That sounds really cool.
Labyrinth is something that you see primarily in Europe in cathedrals. Like in the foyer, there'll be a labyrinth, and it's a walking path. And as opposed to a maze where you can go in and take a wrong turn and meet a dead end, with the labyrinth you don't. There's one way in and one way out. But it's seen historically as kind of a spiritual cleansing process to be walking and praying and thinking. You get to the center. I'm using as a pattern the Hopi Indian Man in the Maze is the title of it, although it's not a maze, but that's the title of the labyrinth I'm going to use, where when you get right to the center, there's an opportunity to kind of look back. One last look back at your life. Is there anything I could have done better? Something I could have done different? But I'm excited about it, and we've got a lot of people who are waiting for that to be completed. But I always have projects going. I mean, Joanne asked me not too long ago, when are we going to get all the projects I've outlined out finished? And I said, if we ever do, I'm going to move, because I don't want to be finished with projects here on our property. I just love having things to look forward to that keep me engaged, keep me connected to the land. And that's going to be one that's going to be a lot of fun.
And you have plenty of room to develop stuff.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
10 acres. So
yeah.
It sounds like the environment that you've immersed yourself in, obviously you said it was intentional, and you've moved to a place where you can be around nature and be around the outdoors and always be creating and walking around your property for ideas. Sometimes when you don't spend time outdoors, what negative effects do you feel in your life?
In building my business coaching, speaking, and writing. I did a lot of corporate workshops on leadership development. Loved the topic, love engaging with people. But on those mornings, I mean, I was paid exorbitant amounts of money to do those. And the mornings where I was going to go do those, I'd walk into this office building and, go up the elevator 8 floors and into a conference room. And I think, oh my gosh, I can tolerate this for 3 hours. I do like the connection. I believe in the content. They're going to pay me well, but get me out of here before lunch. That I just don't feel like I can be my most creative, my most friendly, engaging. I just somehow don't feel like I'm my best self when I'm immersed in concrete and asphalt. So I feel like I'm in an artificial world. So I can't wait to get back out again. And I'm not some kind of, tree hugger, granola eating guy. I mean, again, we enjoy a lot of modern conveniences, but in terms of the work environment, yeah, I don't want it to be where I drive to a parking lot and go up the elevator and down the hall and sit in a cubicle. That's not, to me, the most conducive work environment.
And that's why you built the sanctuary.
That's
Absolutely.
Right.
So how do you make sure that when you're, because you write blog posts pretty much all day Monday, correct?
Yes.
Or I don't know if you still do that, but if you do, you
do.
Still do that. How do you make sure that getting up out of your desk and taking a walk on your nature trail is one of the most important things that you do?
I know that I work. People ask me sometimes how I create the amount of content that I do with blogs and books and ebooks and regular books and podcasts and so on. And a lot of it has to do with working in uninterrupted, focused blocks of time. So I do work in blocks of time, typically 2 to 3 hours at a time on any given project. But then I reward myself by getting outside. I mean, even though I'm sitting here looking out, gorgeous window right on a little water feature, and there are birds and everything around here. It's not like I'm, secluded, but I reward myself. And that's how I frame it, by being able to get outside. So I'll walk down and get the mail or talk to some of the neighbors or go back and check on the bees, or move things around with my little John Deere tractor. That's how I reward myself. But I built my whole work and personal life about being immersed in nature. And then I do take frequent breaks to ground myself, to hear, to smell, to touch, to taste, and see, what nature offers. It's not unusual in my podcast that people are going to hear, some of the sounds. Now I have a, limiting mic that's supposed to just capture my voice, but sometimes the sounds of nature are pretty hard to mask, even when I'm in my work environment.
Well, and I love what you said. Reward yourself with walk in the outdoors. And I think that's what everybody can definitely get out of the show. A ton of content that everybody can learn from you. But just that one statement, reward yourself and get outdoors and just experience the environment around you. And then come back and do the work that you need to do. So many people are just overwhelmed with the commitments that they've created in their life. They're overwhelmed with the work that they're doing and stressed out. And just rewarding yourself with that outdoor experience can have a huge impact on the way that you feel when you go back to work or the way that you feel when you go back to a particular project. So thank you for sharing that with us today. So now, can you share with us one of the most favorite places that you like to go to just get away and think, and what that place means to you?
It's going to sound like a broken record here, I suppose, Brad, but I love my office in the sanctuary. Now, I've done things and traveled to different places. I've gone to the Abbey of Gethsemane a couple different times. That's a Trappist monastery up in Kentucky where Thomas Merton spent his last few years, but it's a monastery. And I thought, is there a place where I could go where I would somehow be more connected, spiritually more connected to nature, and somehow enhance my creativity in writing and thinking? And I found that there's no place on the face of the earth that I like more than walking in my office. Again, I spent some time creating an office space that really is conducive to my thinking and creativity. The colors that were chosen, the wood that's used in the bookshelves, the carpet that's on the floor, the way I'm positioned in the room with a window that I can easily see out. I mean, all those things were very intentional. It's not an elaborate office, but it was just done specifically, intentionally, so that it would be a conducive place for me to be. So I really enjoy being here. There's no place where I feel more alive and more creative than right here in my office.
Well, and a lot of people can have that and can create that type of environment around where you live if you have that opportunity. I know I was recently talking to one of my cousins, and she had come out with my parents last year. They had a sibling family reunion. My mom had 11 brothers and sisters.
Wow.
And so they got together at my parents' house, and one of them was, as they were walking around the property, and my dad was talking to one of my oldest cousins, and she was asking about where they go on vacations and stuff. And they like to travel, but he said something to her that just had an impact on her. Why would he go travel any other place than the place that he loves the most, which is at home? Because we have 10 acres in Ojai as well. And so to be able to, he's created such a beautiful place over the last 30 years that it's just so nice just to be able to go there and relax. But it's the same concept. You know, he loved being at the place where he built.
You know, we have some friends that have a beautiful cabin out on some acreage about 2 hours from Nashville here. And we used to go out there years ago. I mean, they love for us to use it. And there are four-wheelers out there and a lake with boats and all that. And they asked us, not long ago, why we don't go out there anymore. And I told them exactly what you're telling about your own family. I don't have any desire to get away. I don't have any need to escape where we are. This is not only home, but it's the most comfortable, inspiring place in the face of the earth, as far as I know.
So, Dan, I've got a few more questions for you. One of them is the best advice that you have for people who struggle with their time getting outdoors. A lot of people, because some people work more than 40 hours, well, probably a lot of people work more than 40 hours a week. They've got anywhere from a half an hour to 2 hour commute. And so a lot of feedback that I've got is people struggle with the time to themselves, first of all, but time to really get out and experience what nature can offer them. What advice would you have for someone to help them get outdoors more?
Well, the first thing is to decide what's important, because in as much as we talk about not having enough time, we do the things that we choose to do in that amount of time. And we've got the same amount of time that Thomas Edison had or Mother Teresa. We have the same 168 hours a week. So what we do in spending that time really tells what we value most. So the first thing is to kind of draw a line in the sand and decide, what is it that you value most? You may not be able to create a workspace like I have immediately, but if you want to be more connected with nature, I don't think there are the obstacles there that some people claim to have. When somebody says, well, I don't have any choice, I'll be in the work that I do, helping people look at career opportunities. I hear that a lot. Well, I don't have any choice. I got to go to this job. Well, I don't accept that. So I tell people, well, sure, you have a choice. You can choose not to go to work tomorrow morning. Now, you may not like the consequences. We may need to look at some other options, but you have a choice. Nobody's trapped. So that's the first thing. Just this last Sunday, we were out in Leapers Fork. It's a quaint little town, just another about 8 miles out from where we are. And it's home to a lot of country music stars. It's got a kind of artsy community. But we ate at Joe's Natural Farm Store and Cafe. Now, Joe is a really unique character. Joe has a full beard, wears bib overalls, boots that come up to his knees, where they're likely to have a little of the natural essence of a farm on his boots, and he's running the store. But here's his story. He was a New York hedge fund manager, managing millions and millions of dollars, big commercial transactions. He was doing commercial space for Lowe's and Walmart. His wife is a litigating attorney, so they were living the American dream. Money just flowing, they had everything. And then he says they discovered a new kind of rich Now they get up at 4:30 in the morning because they don't have air conditioning in their country home. They have the windows open and they hear their rooster doing his impression of Pavarotti at about 4:30. They get up and start to address the needs of the other 50 animals they have there. They make their own goat cheese. The menu in their little restaurant, which is just a phenomenal, savory, aromatic experience, the menu changes daily based on what they have. So you're going to have things right straight out of the garden onto the table. Now, they don't have the financial portfolio that they once had, but as Joe says, they discovered a new kind of rich. I love stories like that. So, people oftentimes try to excuse the life they have in saying that they're trapped or they don't have any choice. Well, yes, they do. We can make dramatic choices if we choose to. So decide what's important and then be intentional about bringing that into reality.
And he chose to go from an environment that wasn't conducive to his lifestyle and move out to the country on a farm, grow his beard out, and just have fun and do something,
Absolutely.
like you said, just something that makes his life rich. Well, thank you so much, Dan, for being here today with us on the S'more Outdoor podcast. Can you share some final words of encouragement and how S'more Outdoor listeners can connect with you?
Sure, absolutely. I'd be delighted to, and thank you. My encouragement is it's never too late to find or create the work and the life that you want. If you want more of something, just make the decisions now and what you'll do to bring that into reality. There's so many opportunities for us. Then there's so few obstacles. So it's just a matter of deciding. Now, in terms of how to connect with me, 48days.com. If you look up anything 48 days, it's pretty well going to lead you to us. But 48days.com has a lot of resources there. And then 48days.net is a pretty interesting community. It's about 15,000 strong, and it's people who are saying, I don't want to live an ordinary life. I want to do something extraordinary. And I'm willing to link arms with other people who are on the same path to share ideas and resources. So 48days.net, there's no cost to be part of that community, but it's a great way to get encouragement from people, whereas those you're working with or even living with sometimes may not be your biggest cheerleaders for creating a life that really matters.
Well, thank you, Dan. And there's one thing I did forget I wanted to mention in the show, and you had talked about when we scheduled the interview about your anniversary for 48 days.
Sure. 48 Days to the Working Love is kind of still my core message, and that came out in hardback version originally in January of 2005. So I did an update in 2010, but I did a major revision that has just been released as a 10th anniversary edition. And I'm really excited about that. It talks a lot about some of the things we've covered here today, how to create a life that really is fulfilling, purposeful, and profitable at the same time. Don't need to compromise there, but it's just out. I appreciate you mentioning that. 48 Days to the Working Love, 10th anniversary edition.
Well, thanks again for being here today, Dan. I really appreciate your time and helping people become inspired to spend more time outdoors and just get out there and experience the nature effect.
Absolutely. My pleasure. I love talking about this. And as you indicated, this is a different kind of interview. I do a lot of interviews, but it tends to be pretty similar content. This took me into areas that I don't get to verbalize very often. So I thank you for the opportunity.
You're definitely welcome, Dan. That's it for today's episode of S'more Outdoor. I'm so excited to be here with you again today to share the stories and outdoor experiences from people like Dan. A few things before I go. You can head on over to s'moreoutdoor.com to see the recap of Dan's show on his show notes page, along with ways that you can connect with him. Just type Dan in the search bar. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, we would love it if you would leave a comment on his page where Dan and I will respond. To stay updated with new episodes, I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating and review. This helps to get the show noticed so others like you and I can learn about how the nature effect can have an impact in their lives and become inspired by these stories. And while you're at the website, make sure you sign up for the newsletter. That way you won't miss out on any exclusive content I send out. So I hope that Dan's story has inspired you to reconnect with nature and start living with childlike wonder again. Thank you for tuning into the show that's changing lives around the world. Until next time, I challenge you to do something this week To get S'more Outdoor.